Hello, BookTube. Welcome back to the History Shelf. I am Peg, your host as ever. And gosh, it's a Sunday. I'm coming at you on a Sunday. It's kind of a treat. I feel kind of excited. It's been a while since I made a Sunday video, but I thought I would make a video before running some errands. We've got groceries to pick up. I've got some yard work later, hence the hat. You know, not doing up the hair for yard work. It's going to be 92 today. I need to do some weed whacking. I've got a nice big bug bite on my forehead to indicate all the fun we're having outdoors. But today is part one of a Hamilton book haul that I've been sitting on just for a few weeks. I think maybe, about a few weeks. So it was pretty big. I think this might have been the biggest order I've made. I kind of collected things over time. These are things to accentuate and fill out some of my collection on certain topics. And so I'm really excited by some of the finds that I got because, I do deep dives on Hamilton book and I do all my filters and I search by certain things so I can find if there's something out there at a great deal, especially like university presses or Rowman and Littlefield, which they just had a bunch of stuff marked down. I picked up a few of those, but, scholarly type of titles. So these are history. Maybe one or two theology or, I guess, religion, history of religion, philosophy kind of stuff. Then I do have some fiction, but I'm going to put the fiction in part two. So if you're looking for fiction, check out part two. So I'm not sure if I'm going to have part two done today, but definitely we'll be posting it tomorrow or something like that. So without further ado, because I want to see if I can get through some of these big heavy hitters, like juicy titles in the next 30, 40 minutes. You guys want to hang with me on a Sunday? All right. Let's see. Let's start with the Templars. Why not? So this was a neat looking volume. A couple of things that I bought because they were a nicer edition. I don't think I have this book. In fact, I know I don't. I think I have another book with a similar title. This might be the same thing, but I don't know. But I love the cover, and this is going to look good with my other Templars books, History of the Templars. And I'm sure Jason Harrigan has this as well. But this is The Knights Templars, God's Warriors, The Devil's Bankers by Frank Sinello. This edition is from Taylor Trade. Nice little hardcover here. What does it say here? Well, I'm not going to read. Obviously, we've got a lot of books to move through. It's not a huge book. It's a little over. It's about 300 pages. Says here, the history of the Knights Templars, the medieval order of warrior monks who fought in the Crusades, is a centuries-spanning epic that encompasses such conflicting elements as idealism and cynicism, valor and cowardice, piety and depravity. Officially, they were the Order of the Poor Knights of Christ, and their mission was to create a safe passage for pilgrims visiting war-torn Jerusalem in the early 12th century. Despite their vows of poverty, the Templars turned out to be brilliant businessmen, renowned for their honesty. Their monasteries served as banks, that was in quotes, in which Europe's rulers and nobles felt safe enough to deposit their money. The Templars also operated highly regarded medical schools, invented cashier's checks, and commanded a naval fleet that allowed them to engage in trade throughout the Atlantic and Mediterranean. But the Templars' wealth and influence provoked jealousy and resentment, as their detractors accused them of betraying their original role as poor men of God. In the early 14th century, King Philip the Fair had all the Templars in France arrested on trumped-up charges of heresy, witchcraft, and homosexuality. Condemned by a series of kangaroo courts and subjected to years of imprisonment and torture, and it says here in parentheses, history has since acquitted the Templars of almost all charges. All but two Templars, including the Grand Master of the Order, Jacques de Molay, ultimately confessed to crimes they didn't commit, accepted offers of clemency, and retired to monasteries. In 1314 A.D., de Molay and his fellow unrepentant monk were burned at the stake in the Parisian garden of the French king. So in The Knights Templar by Frank Sinello here, it says he examines the genuine history of these men of God and Mammon and debunks the outrageous myths that arose after their demise. And he's using the most recent academic research and on and on. It's going to be an interesting read. And it looks like Taylor Trade is an imprint of Roman Littlefield, and that's another reason why this was, I think, like $5.95 or something. But a beautiful book, no remainder marks. I love bargain shopping at Hamilton Book. Next book, I picked up a paperback. Oh, it's also from Roman and Littlefield. And I think this pretty much rounds out my entire collection of Alexis de Tocqueville writings about Tocqueville. I've got a bunch. And so it's time, I'm going to stop purchasing on Tocqueville and get to reading through the ones I've got. But this final one I picked up is Alexis de Tocqueville and American Intellectuals, From His Times to Ours by Matthew Mancini. A little soft cover here. Let's see here. I had a really good description on the website, but this is mostly blurbed. Let's just read one of these blurbs here. And this is a blurb from another author who I have his book. It's called The Making of Tocqueville's Democracy in America by James Schleifer. I have that one. So this is his blurb about this book. So Matthew Mancini's book is a major contribution to the field of Tocqueville scholarship. It is a very bold, ambitious undertaking. Mancini tackles almost all of the major American secondary works, editions, and translations relating to Tocqueville since the 1830s. The focus of this work is to tell the story of Tocqueville's reception and reputation in the United States, to survey most of the major writers and scholars who have studied and interpreted Tocqueville's writings and ideas, and to recreate the intellectual links among those Americans who have written about, edited, and translated Tocqueville. This is not only a significant work of Tocqueville scholarship, but also a fascinating study of American intellectual history, examined through the particular lens of the American reception of Tocqueville. So that sounds pretty darn awesome. Let me look at some of the chapter headings. Yeah, nothing too revelatory there, but American intellectuals and how they responded to Tocqueville and his work. All right, and then I'm so excited by these two books too. These are mostly books that, this is an author over in the UK, an historian, who's very prominent in one of the magazines that I subscribe to, the Aspects of History. I don't subscribe. I think I just purchased the print edition on Amazon. I've talked about it before, I think, in one of my last videos. But Saul David. And they had two of his books, and he's got a new one coming out that I want to get. So, and I've never read him before, but I enjoy his articles and interviews and things he's done in other venues. But was really pleased to see on Hamilton Book, they had two of his books, hardcover marked down, and so I'm like, it's time for me to read Saul David. I'm trying to think which one is the first one. Well, I don't know when this one came out. Let's take a look. So, yeah, he's written a lot of World War II histories. This one came out 2020. And the next one... Okay, so this is the first book that I think... Well, this came out in 2019, and this is The Force, the legendary Special Ops unit in World War II's Mission Impossible, Saul David. It's put out by Hachette, if you will. What is this one about? In December 1943, as Nazi forces sprawled around the world and the future of civilization hung in the balance, a group of highly trained U.S. and Canadian soldiers from humble backgrounds was asked to do the impossible, capture a crucial Nazi stronghold perched atop stunningly steep cliffs. The men were a rough-and-ready group of lumberjacks, hunters, mountain men, and explorers, assembled from towns nestled in North America's most unforgiving terrain, where many of them had struggled through the Great Depression, relying on canny survival skills and the fearlessness of youth. Brought together by the promise to take part in the military's most elite missions, they formed a unique brotherhood, tested first by the crucible of state-of-the-art training, including skiing, rock climbing, and parachuting, and then tragically by the vicious fighting they would face. I'm trying to see where. This wasn't the Nordic. This wasn't the plant like the that secret mission to the Norway, was it? So, it says here the early battle in the Italian theater for the strategic fort. Okay, cost the heroic U.S. Canadian Commando Unit, the first special forces unit ever assembled, enormous casualties. Yet the victory put them in position to continue their drive into Italy, setting the stage for the Allies' resurgence toward victory in World War II. Apparently, this unit became the model for the Green Berets and other special forces groups. So isn't that fascinating? Oh, and here's our author. So there's Saul David. Let me know if you've heard of him and or read this book or any of his works. I'd be curious to know what you think of him as a historian and as a writer, because I have not read his full-length work. Like I said, I've read short pieces by him, but just curious if you have. And so this book came out in 2020, and definitely something I wanted to get because I've been reading a lot more. And some of the books I've been assigned for book reviewing. Been reading some recent work on a lot of the Pacific Theater, operations in the Pacific Theater. Most recently, I read The Mosquito Bowl, which was a fantastic work, and talked about the Battle of Okinawa. And this work is on Battle of Okinawa in particular, so I was really pleased to find this. So this is Saul David's Crucible of Hell, The Heroism and Tragedy of Okinawa, 1945. So that's a really evocative cover. Another Hachette book. So obviously this is all about the Okinawan invasion in order to capture Okinawa, which was the greatest air-land-sea battle in history, mobilizing 183,000 troops at ports around the world, from Seattle, Washington to Leyte in the Philippines. The campaign lasted for 83 blood-soaked days as the fighting plumbed the depths of savagery. One veteran, struggling to make sense of what he had witnessed, referred to the fighting as the Crucible of Hell. It's a very apt title. Yeah, it was brutal. It's just interesting to me how, in a lot of mainstream, Band of Brothers was great in that. I mean, but it covered the Eastern Front, and it did it very well. And then they made the Pacific, which I thought did capture a lot of that brutality and racism and other things that were going on. But I tell you what, the savagery was intense. And I'm not sure if that was more because of the nature of two different races fighting each other. And the fact that Japan also they were also racist in the sense that they thought the white man was beneath them, that they were the superior race. So it's just interesting in the sense that, when they're fighting, I just wonder if that just elevated it to another level, or if it had a lot to do with just geography and the jungle and the heat and everything else that just played into the carnage. Just idle thoughts I've had about it, but it was tragic. It says here Okinawan civilians died in the tens of thousands. Some were mistaken for soldiers by American troops, which is another thing that I learned from The Mosquito Bowl, the book that I read by. I need to say the author's name. Hold please. I don't want to. Not give the guy credit because it's. I think the book is out now, but I did review it. Buzz Bissinger, and he wrote Friday Night Lights. Actually, that's not out yet because one of the outlets I review for, they need my review far in advance of the publication date. So I've already read it. It's done, and it's not even out yet. It's coming out September 13th, but it's called The Mosquito Bowl: A Game of Life and Death in World War II. By Buzz Bissinger. It's being put out by Harper. So keep that on your radars if you're interested. It's kind of a nice mixture of football and how a lot of the players who were over in the Pacific Theater were like major stars, major talent from college days, and some even played in the NFL and lost their lives over in the Pacific Theater in World War II. But in that Mosquito Bowl book, what I'm trying to say here is that he talked about how Okinawa the Okinawans were actually, they had an interesting, I don't want to say relationship with the Japanese, but they were considered different. They weren't really considered by the Japanese to be true Japanese. So in a way, these Okinawans, they had their own like dialect. They were kind of caught in the middle, and so the Americans were thinking that they're the enemy when really they were also being like colonized, or they had the brutal suppression of the Japanese overlords, and so just because they were part of that island chain, but. And so it says here, the civilians died because a lot of times, the American troops were like, well, they're all Japanese. Well, they really weren't. Yeah, and then that story about how there was that mass suicide of people because the Okinawans were believing the propaganda of the Japanese, saying that the Americans were just bloodthirsty beasts and savages, and they're going to rape your women and kill your children, and it's better to die than surrender to them. And the Americans were like, when they realized that these were just the civilians, they were like, we're not going to do that. But there was that whole scene on the cliff where all these people were just jumping off, and soldiers witnessed that, and that's just horrific. So that's just another part of that story. But got some great photos in here, and so yeah, I'm really intrigued to read Saul David's work on this. So 2 great books by Saul David. I'm hoping they'll be great. But for the price, I was like, why not? All right, and then we're going to let's move over here. So we're going to move to Vietnam. Okay. This is an interesting volume. This is another, again, like I said, sometimes they have volumes that are from Britain, UK or elsewhere, and this was not the American version of Max Boot's book. And a lot of you have know of Max Boot, and I've got his work. I think he's a fairly good historian. He moved into the area of politics for a little while, but whatever. But this book, I know, wasn't it up for some awards or something like that? But this is not the American version, and I really the dust jacket cover is just very, very powerful. This is Max Boot's The Road Not Taken, and I bet you've never seen this version before. I think his version had something like red, and then you have the picture of Edward Lansdale, and this is put up ahead of Zeus. So look at that spine, and this was $9.95. And that's probably the more expensive of the books that I, buy there at Hamilton Book. But this is The Road Not Taken, Edward Lansdale and the American Tragedy in Vietnam. There's a big old blurb by Petraeus on there. And at first, if the jacket almost looks like it's a naked hardcover, but it's not. But it's a very beautiful green, nice declarative fonts there, It's just a beautiful edition. Head of Zeus. Wow. It says here, in this ambitious biography of Edward Lansdale, the man said to be the model for Graham Greene's The Quiet American, best-selling historian Max Boot demonstrates how Lansdale pioneered a hearts and mind diplomacy first in the Philippines and later in Vietnam. It was a visionary policy that was ultimately crushed by America's giant military bureaucracy, steered by elitist generals and diplomats who favored napalm bombs over winning the trust of the people. Through dozens of interviews and access to documents that have never been seen before, including long-hidden love letters, Boot recasts this cautionary American story, tracing the bold rise and the crashing fall of the roguish T.E. Lawrence of Asia, from the Battle of Dien Bien Phu to humiliating American evacuation to the humiliating American evacuation from Saigon in 1975. So it's a wonderful volume, and I just said, you know what, I want to have a different volume than the one that the American publishing houses put out. So it's gorgeous. Maps, insert the photos. Several inserts of photos. There's at least 3 inserts throughout the book, so they don't skimp. There's Lansdale. It's Bobby Kennedy. Nice. Isn't that nice? All right. Moving on. All right. Let's move backwards in time to World War One, which I am reading right now with my buddy Bill Rutenberg at the Rutenberg Library. We are just started a week ago or so reading Max Hastings' 1914 Catastrophe. So we are in the beginning of that, but I just thought this book, and I'm surprised, and it's another title from Rowman and Littlefield. I think they just had a big surplus of books they finally just pushed over to the bargain outlets. Like, we can't sell these, go ahead and take them. Well, I picked this up for a song. I'm going to say like $7.95 at the most, but it's a brand new book. Not brand new, but it's a new book. It's The Pity of War. The England and Germany, bitter friends, beloved foes. Miranda Seymour is the author. Just gorgeous. No remainder marks. Okay, so it says here in 1613, a beautiful Stuart princess married a handsome young German prince. This was a love match, but it was also an alliance that aimed to meld Europe's two great Protestant powers. Before Elizabeth and Frederick left London for the court in Heidelberg, they watched a performance of The Winter's Tale. In 1943, a group of British POWs gave a performance of that same play to a group of enthusiastic Nazi guards in Bavaria. Nothing about the story of England and Germany, as this remarkable book demonstrates, is as simple as we might expect. Sorry, I heard a dog out there. Miranda Seymour tells the forgotten story of England's centuries of profound connection and increasingly rivalrous friendship with Germany, linked by a shared faith, a shared hunger for power, a shared culture. Germany never doubted that Shakespeare belonged to them as much as to England, and a shared leadership. German monarchs ruled over England for 300 years and only ceased to do so through a change of name. This extraordinary and heartbreaking history, told through the lives of princes and painters, soldiers and sailors, bakers and bankers, charlatans and saints, traces two countries so entwined that one German living in England in 1915 refused to choose where his allegiance lay. It was, he said, as if his parents had quarreled. Germany's connection to the island it loved, patronized, influenced, and fought was unique. Indeed, British soldiers went to war in 1914 against a country to which many of them felt more closely connected than to their own. So, drawing on a wealth of unpublished letters and papers, the author uncovers stories that remind us of the powerful bonds many have chosen to forget. So, The Pity of War. That's another title. That's a Neil Ferguson history. I have it up on my shelf there. Yeah, he also has a book on World War I called The Pity of War. But I thought this one was really intriguing, that it just really dives into and not just in World War. It's not just talking about World War I, obviously. It goes backwards and kind of just shows the connections, the intellectual, cultural, social connections of England and Germany. And I'm like, this belongs in my library. So I was happy to find that. Okay, and then these kind of go together. Let's talk a little Irish history, shall we? You guys know that I have a little bit of a personal connection to Irish history. And if you're new to the channel, that's because my partner, Martine, was born in Ireland. She is born just outside Dublin. We're inside Dublin. I'm not sure. We'd like to go. I want to go there. We're trying to find the right time and to go back and visit her homeland. But she immigrated here when she was in her teens. But she knows a lot about Irish history, obviously, and grew up hearing the Irish language, and it's fascinating. So I'm always trying to educate myself about her, her heritage, and mine to an extent. My grandmother, last name was a McMonagle. I have extended relatives from McMonagles out in the eastern coast, and so I'm part Irish, but definitely not, I'm not a dual citizen like Martinez. Actually, she's still just an Irish citizen. So, I thought I would do some educating. And this is an older title from the great folks at Casemate and Pen and Sword. So, Casemate distributes Pen and Sword books. This one came out a little while ago, and I must have missed it, but I picked it up. I'm happy to pay for it. This came out in 2019. And this is The Roots of Ireland's Troubles by Robert Stedall. Very beautiful book, very beautiful cover. Look at that. Let me see here. All right, get ready for this. If the objective of colonization should be the establishment of economic benefit, in Ireland it was to enforce order. Settlers were required to usurp the traditional lands of its indigenous population. Their attempts to enforce Protestantism in all its forms onto the dogmatically Catholic locality were doomed to failure. With unrest continuing, Ireland became the battleground for the English Civil War, fought out between royalist and parliamentarian to the detriment of its people. The availability of cheap Irish labor soon led to calls to protect English agricultural prices. Fears that Irish goods would undercut English production costs led to calls to prevent the development of an Irish industrial revolution, despite the desperate need to employ the surplus rural population. This inevitably led to famine. No one believed the problem which was unfolding, despite all the efforts of nationalist politicians. English landowners in Parliament were only concerned to protect landlord interests and to score points off their political opponents. If home rule could not be delivered by political means, it would inevitably be delivered by force. With its inextricable links to the history of Britain, Stedall guides the reader through Ireland's turbulent but rich history. To understand the causes behind the 20th century conflict, which continues to resonate today, we must look to the long arc of history, truly to understand the historical roots of a nation's conflict. So, sign me up for that. I am ready to learn. Inform me, and I'm sure I will talk over what I'm reading and learning with Martine, just to check in. Just to check in and say, is this right? So, The Roots of Ireland's Troubles by Robert Stedall. Ow, I just scratched my face. Okay, just a quick pause here because I need a drink because I'm a little hoarse. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. So then this other book, more it moves into contemporary times. This was really marked down, like a $2.95 price cut or something like that. So if you're interested, go to Hamilton Book. It's probably still there. This is Ruth Dudley Edwards' The Seven, The Lives and Legacies of the Founding Fathers of the Irish Republic. This is put out by One World Books. A good, 360-page book on this, but it says here, on Easter Sunday, April 23rd, April 1916, the Irish Republican Brotherhood's Military Council put their names to the proclamation of the Irish Republic, declaring that they were the provisional government of an Ireland free from British rule. In effect, each man had knowingly signed his own death warrant. Since then, the Seven have been eulogized and used as political weapons by many. To challenge the morality of the rising was to be denounced as unpatriotic, even un-Irish. 100 years on, however, there is increasing recognition that it's time for Ireland's founding fathers to come under proper scrutiny. Award-winning author Ruth Dudley Edwards explores how these men came together to initiate an armed rebellion that profoundly changed the course of Irish history. She draws on a lifetime's research and reflection to separate each man from his myth, assess his virtues and flaws, and bring together the strands of 1916's revolutionary web. What made the Seven believe this is a question. What made the Seven believe themselves entitled to stage a rebellion without authorization from the organizations they claimed to represent? Did they share a coherent vision? The Seven challenges us to judge the actions of Ireland's founding fathers and to determine what their legacy has really been. In William Faulkner's words, the past is never dead. It's not even past. Okay. So Ruth was born in Dublin and now lives in London. It's very important for me to understand where she's coming from here. Apparently, she's written several books on Irish history, including biographies of James Connolly and Patrick Pearse, who are featured as part of the Seven in this book. So the Seven, who were the Seven? Thomas J. Clarke, Sean McDermott, I'm butchering these Irish names. Martine will be so mad at me. Emin can't. I can't. I don't want to butcher these names. Let me read the ones I can pronounce. Thomas McDonough, Joseph Plunkett, James Connolly, and then there's a couple of different chapters that talk about legacies and last acts and stuff like that. So this is going to be good. I think I would read this one after the roots. This one goes way back in time. So we'll start with we'll follow up the roots of Ireland's troubles with the Seven. That makes sense, right? Okay. Now what are we going to do? Where are we going next, Peg? I think we're doing actually pretty well. We've actually gone through quite a bit here. So now we're going to move to the Civil War. This was a book put out by Kentucky University or University of Kentucky Press, I think. Yeah, the University Press of Kentucky. This came out in 2005. So it's been out for a little while, but I've never seen it. And this was a more expensive book. It's normally a $40 hardcover. I think I did pay $9.95 for this because I have a vast Civil War history collection, and I've never heard of this guy. And I'm not going to lie, I also was really I thought it was a beautifully put together book, and the description was interesting. So, and I'll read a little bit about this person, but yeah, I've never heard of this book in all my wanderings in Civil War history. But this is Basil Wilson Duke, CSA, The Right Man, sorry for the glare, The Right Man in the Right Place, by Gary Robert Matthews. Okay, and that is put out by University Press of Kentucky. So I saw the cover and I was like, well, got some cavalry action going on here. What is, it says here, by the early 20th century, Basil Wilson Duke had established himself as one of Kentucky's most popular storytellers, but unlike many other talented raconteurs, Duke was not merely a man of words. In this book, the first full-length biography of this distinguished American, Gary Robert Matthews offers keen insight into the challenges Duke faced before, during, and after the strife of the Civil War. As first lieutenant of General John Hunt Morgan's legendary band of Confederate raiders, Duke became Morgan's most trusted advisor and an integral contributor to his dramatic tactical successes. Duke was twice wounded in battle and was captured during a raid in Ohio in 1863. Held captive for over a year, Duke rejoined Morgan's cavalry in August 1864, only days before Morgan, who was Duke's brother-in-law, met his demise in Greenville, Tennessee. Promoted to brigadier general and appointed commander of Morgan's men, he helped convince Jefferson Davis of the futility of continued resistance at the close of the war and was assigned to the force escorting Davis in his escape. Duke's life of action and achievement, however, did not end with the war. He wrote a history of Morgan's cavalry, preserving for posterity the experiences of his fellow warriors, and covered for the Louisville Courier-Journal an 1875 horse race that would eventually be known as the First Kentucky Derby. Isn't that wild? He built a reputation as a skilled historical writer, and his interests led him to help found the Filson Historical Society in Louisville. I only said Louisville because there's a city that not too far from here that my work office used to be in, but it's Louisville, and some people call it Louisville, but in this case it's actually Louisville, but in Kentucky it's Louisville. Okay. Duke also applied his talents to public and political life. He opened a law office and was elected as a Democrat to the Kentucky House, where he served until 1870. Yeah, so it's a comprehensive biography of this guy. I've never heard of him before, but I was intrigued. I was hoping to get... I'd like to the escape of Jefferson Davis was always... I have another book about that called Flight into Oblivion, but I'm always keen to get a little bit more information on how all that went down. So I'm hoping that this will be covered towards the end hopefully in a very detailed way, maybe relying on Wilson's own writing, or Duke's writing, I should say, Basil Wilson Duke. So, yeah, just an arcane little find, which happens sometimes in Hamilton book, and I get so tickled pink when that does. All right, now we're going to jump back in time to a collection of writings. We've got 2 anthologies here. These are both out by Manchester University Press. interesting little two set hardcover, soft covers here. So this goes to the From Enlightenment to Romanticism, Anthology 1, edited by Ian Donashi, and Carmen Lavin. Again, Manchester. It says here, this is the first of 2 anthologies designed, and it's an open university course, apparently. Oh, this is kind of neat. Okay, so it's like a textbook in a way. This is the first of 2 anthologies designed to accompany the open university course From Enlightenment to Romanticism, an interdisciplinary exploration of the changes and transitions in European culture between 1780 and 1830. The collection of extracts in this anthology provides primary sources on the death of the old regime, the Napoleonic phenomenon, slavery, religion, and reform. Each selection is accompanied by a detailed introduction explaining the context and significance of the sources. Extracts in the anthology stimulate questions rather than provide reassuring answers and offer vital insights into the major events, movements, and personalities of the time. So it says here, a companion volume offers readings on industry and changing landscapes, new forms of the knowledge, new conceptions of art and the artist, and the exotic and the oriental. Okay, so this was from an open university course. I've never taken an open university course, but it's an anthology. I think this just covers. They got just extracts. Got Rousseau. We've got. What have we got here? Some of these are very long. We've got David Hume, Faith and Death in the Late Enlightenment, the Immortality of the Soul. So this is okay. So this is Anthology 1, and one of these was on a price cut. So I was like $3.95, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna get both of them now. Then I have from Enlightenment to Romanticism, Anthology 2. Nice, beautiful artwork on these covers. About the same size. And like I kind of mentioned in the last description, so this one covers industry, landscapes, new forms of knowledge, art, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so I think I just kind of gave it away by reading the first book. So not too bad. I got both of these for like $8, both of them total. Very nice. Nice little selection you can dip into now and again. You don't actually need to read it cover to cover. Okay, let me 2 more books, and then I'm going to break and do a second part. I'm going to start uploading this one. So this was a book. It's kind of different. It's from the University of Pennsylvania Press. You know me, I like eclectic titles. This came out in 2017. This is Be a Perfect Man, Christian Masculinity and the Carolingian Aristocracy by Andrew J. Romig. Slim little volume, but I think it's going to pack an intellectual punch. What is it about, Peg? I'll tell you. The life of an aristocratic Carolingian man involved an array of behaviors and duties associated with his gender and rank. In education in arms and letters, training in horsemanship, soldiery and hunting, betrothal, marriage, and the virile production of heirs, and the masterful command of a prominent household. In Be a Perfect Man, Andrew Romig argues that Carolingian masculinity was constituted just as centrally by the performance of caritas, defined by the early medieval scholar Alcuin of York as a complete and all-inclusive love for God and for fellow human beings, flowing from the whole heart, mind, and soul. The authority of the Carolingian man depended not only on his skills in warfare and landholding, but also on his performances of empathy, devotion, and asceticism. Romig maps caritas as a concept rooted in a vast body of inherited Judeo-Christian and pagan philosophies, shifting in meaning and association, from the patristic era to the Central Middle Ages. Carolingian discussions and representations of caritas served as a discourse of power, a means by which early medieval writers made claims, both explicit and implicit, about the hierarchies of power that they believed ought to exist within their world. During the late 8th, 9th, and early 10th centuries, they creatively invoked caritas to link aristocratic men with divine authority. Romig gathers conduct handbooks, theological tracts, poetry, classical philosophy, church legislation, and exegetical texts to outline an associative process of gender ideology in the Carolingian Middle Ages, one that framed masculinity, asceticism, and authority as intimately interdependent. The association of power and empathy remains with us to this day, Romig argues, as a justification for existing hierarchies of authority, privilege, and prestige. So, there you have that. He's got a lot to cover here in about, minus all the notes, and they are ample notes at the back, end notes, which is fantastic. It's 164 pages, so it's going to be an interesting argument that he's going to tie together. I'm wondering how he's going to range through some of those broad categories, but be a perfect man, baby. All right. Okay, final book for this part one of my book haul is, now we're going to go to Age of Exploration, maybe? This is Escalante's Dream. On the Trail of the Spanish Discovery of the Southwest by David Roberts. And David Roberts, I've actually got some other of his history. He's written a, I think he wrote a book on Washington, right? I think so. I think. Also by David Roberts. I don't know if this one is, I think he wrote the Washington book later, maybe? Oh, I'm thinking of David O. Stewart. Never mind me, guys. I come across so many different authors that sometimes I get them mixed up. So this book came out in 2019. And I guess David Roberts is an adventure writer. And he's retracing the route of the Dominguez Escalante expedition. Okay. This is a beautiful cover. Like, lovely artwork there. This is put out by Norton. All right, last book here. In July 1776, a pair of Franciscan friars, Francisco Atanasio Dominguez and Silvestre Velez de Escalante, were charged by the governor of New Mexico with discovering a route across the unknown Southwest to the new Spanish colony in California. They had other goals as well, some of them secret, converting the indigenous natives along the way to the true faith, discovering a semi-mythical paradise known as Tiguayo, hunting for sources of gold and silver, and paving the way for Spanish settlements from Santa Fe to Monterey. In strict terms, the expedition failed. Running out of food and beset by an early winter, the 12-man team gave up in what is now western Utah. The retreat to Santa Fe became an ordeal of survival. Hi, Boomer. I see your face down there. The men were reduced to eating their own horses while they searched for a crossing of the raging Colorado River in Glen Canyon. The now shrinking Colorado River, unfortunately. 7 months after setting out, Dominguez and Escalante staggered back to Santa Fe. Yet in the course of their 1,700-mile voyage, the explorers discovered more land unknown to Europeans than Lewis and Clark would encounter a quarter-century later. Other writers, using Escalante's brilliant and quirky diary as a guide, have retraced the expedition route, but David Roberts is the first to dig beneath its pages to question and ponder every turn of the team's decision-making and motivation. Roberts weaves the personal and the historical narratives into a gripping journey of discovery through the magnificent American Southwest. So I have been really just intrigued with the whole Spanish story of, how far they went into the interior. And this book will be an added bonus to a few of the books I have on the topic. This is really cool. It's got a bunch of different things going on. There's some artwork. Escalante. I wonder if he travels part of this route. It looks like he does, because he's taking pictures of places along the way, like the store and Paradox Valley. It's got a tent here. Anyway, it sounds like it's going to be an interesting, fun read. So, all right, guys, that was part one of my big blockbuster book haul from Hamilton. Stay tuned, or please check out part two, coming your way very soon. Bye.